Good morning, might be even good afternoon for some of you. So a few people just coming in, we're just letting everyone into the room now. So do make sure you're comfortable in your space. Perhaps you've got some hydration ready for our sporting meet this morning. Okay, I'm just going to give another few seconds for people to arrive and we'll make a start. So we're going to be talking a lot about outdoor sports this morning. And one of the features I think that many of us might enjoy as part of our outdoor sports is camping. So in our Zoom room today, we're really all coming into the same big tent. So welcome into the tent. But in order for us to share this space together, there needs to be a few house rules. So just as we're coming together, I'll just remind you of just some of those house rules in our Zoom tent that we're sharing this morning. Please let us know who you are. We're very keen to interact with you today. So on your name in your little Zoom square, please put your name and the organisation who you're representing, or if you're not representing an organisation, just tell us who you are. So please, on your Zoom square, put your name on. That way, we can chat and interact with each other. This session is being recorded. If that's something you're not comfortable with, please feel free to switch your video off. But if you're okay with that, we do like to keep the videos on if your bandwidth in your space, in your place, allows that to happen. Because it's just, as human beings, just nice to see each other. So if you're able to, please keep your videos on. We don't like speaking into a dark and empty room. On the other hand, we do ask you to keep your microphones muted, just so we can, reduce as much of the background noise as possible. But on the other hand, you've got a great opportunity to interact and connect with each other. And I can see many of you are already doing that on the chat function. So please do your morning salutations and say hello to everyone. Tell us where you're from. But in addition, I see a few of you have jumped the gun there. But in addition, tell us what your favourite outdoor sport is. What outdoor sports do you take part in? Share that information across the tent this morning, the community this morning. And we'll have an opportunity to engage with you a wee bit later. We've got some great speakers lined up, and you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions or make some comments about what they've been talking about. And if you could also do that in the chat too, and we'll have some time towards the end of our meeting this morning to bring those questions to the speakers. So, my name is Carol Ritchie, and I like to think I'm a decent hiker. I'm not a very good biker. I'm a great snowshoe enthusiast. I'm a failed canoeist and a wild swimmer, although in Scotland, we just call that swimming. Certainly, I learned to swim in the lochs around about where I grew up, so it was just swimming, not wild swimming. But that's that's me in my outdoor sports. But my day job is actually to be the executive director of the EUROPARC Federation. The EUROPARC Federation is the network of protected areas in Europe, and we represent thousands of parks and protected areas across almost 40 countries. So we represent those who manage these special and iconic spaces that we like to enjoy our outdoor sports in, whether those places are close to cities, on the coast, on the sea, or indeed in the mountains. But one thing that makes all these spaces similar is that people are part of that landscape, whether they live, work, or indeed play there. So we're always asking the question, are we engaging with, or are we in some way affecting the nature that we're enjoying? And you in the tent, in the room with us today, are here to help us answer that. And there'll be an opportunity that we're going to share with you a bit later for you to give us your views and thoughts about that. But first of all, we're going to invite Lisa Brenkelmans to take the front of the tent and speak to us. She lives for her bike, if not on her bike. She's an experienced mountain biker, but she's lucky enough not only to enjoy moving through these incredible landscapes and admiring the biodiversity, but nature is also her office as an ecologist working in sustainable forestry. And she believes that outdoor sports practitioners And those responsible for protecting our biodiversity and managing our protected areas can indeed be allies working together for nature. So Lisa, can I hand over to you to share from your experience how we can work together as sports enthusiasts and protected area managers?
I'd be happy to, Carol. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Does everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, my name is Lisa Breugelmans. I'm a Belgian biologist working in the sustainable forestry and nature management sector. Most of my days nowadays consist of either preparing, planning, or executing nature management measures, which can range from biodiversity assessments in nature areas, helping with the construction of nature management plans for private forests and smaller nature areas, and also executing sustainable forestry practices to create more resilient and more biodiverse forests. But the reason I'm here today is also partly because in my free time, I really like to explore these landscapes that I help preserve every day, and preferably by bike. I'm also an avid hiker and trail runner, but my favorite way to get out there and explore is definitely to close my computer on a Friday evening, to strap some essentials on my bike, and to start pedaling. Um, this way of low impact traveling is also referred to as bikepacking. And for me, it's the ideal way to really connect with these landscapes that I'm moving through, because it is slow enough to take in your natural surroundings and the biodiversity, but still it allows me to cover more ground than I would normally do by foot. So the you just have a greater diversity of landscapes to take in. Over the years, I've done a number of shorter and longer bikepacking trips, which range from local overnighters to crossing the Western Alps to more recently a 6-day loop in the Andalusian Sierras. But of course, the last year and a half, it's been due to the global pandemic, it's been mostly local exploring, which really articulated my appreciation of the nature that we have in our home region. However, as a biologist, I'm also very aware of the of the impacts that are related to any presence of humans in natural landscapes, really. Some of these include, of course, soil compaction and erosion, which is dependent on a number of factors like the characteristics of the soil, of course, the humidity factor, the type of recreation, and the frequency. Vegetation loss or alteration, degraded water quality, littering, unfortunately, and the disruption of wildlife, for example, the impact on ground breeding birds, on larger mammals, flight behavior. And the fact that we know that we as recreational users always have an impact, of course, begs the question, do recreational users even belong in natural areas at all, given the fact that a lot of our natural areas are declining in quantity or quality? Of course, most land manager and nature protectionists these days recognize the benefits of allowing outdoor recreation in their areas. For example, the improved health and mental well-being of the users, but also the generated financial income through sustainable tourism for local communities. And I also recognize that it is necessary to allow a certain degree of recreation in order to increase public support for natural development. Because if users don't come into close contact with these environments, then they will also not be inclined to make efforts to protect them. You don't love what you don't know, that's clear. Of course, as a biologist, it's because I essentially, as a biologist and as an outdoor user, because I'm essentially playing for both sides, let's say, it's not so hard for me to get into the minds of both the nature protectionist and the user. And I would like to give you a little bit of an in-look into the thinking of both sides and what their priorities and needs are. From a nature protectionist perspective, habitat and species should be preserved and protected, especially if they're already vulnerable and in decline because of in numbers or in quality. Any extra pressure really on already vulnerable ecosystems should be avoided. The impact of recreation should be kept as low as possible. And I often see that a rule of minimal accessibility is applied in certain areas, especially speaking from experience in the lowlands here in Belgium and the Netherlands, which means that access is given or a trail network is developed, for example, for hikers only. And other groups of recreational users are either banned or are given, for example, one trail on the outside or on the border of the reserve, which doesn't always meet the requirements of the user and which doesn't really allow them to interact or experience the real values of that nature reserve. So it begs the question, as ecologists or as nature protectionists, should we always use the principle of caution if we don't really, if we don't have evidence for the impact or the differential impact of these different user groups? Or should we consider the needs of all groups and where it's possible, try to address them? Then from a recreational user's perspective, I think all groups want to be considered as legitimate trail users and yeah, have their needs met and be respected as an outdoor user. I know a lot of groups also appreciate the freedom to plan their own routes. So where it's possible, they would like to experience the adventure more by being able to have a choice of trails or of trail networks and not just being confined to one route. And has been proven by a number of research surveys, among others, the one of the International Mountain Biking Association, but also of independent researchers. Users often highlight the importance of the natural aspect of their trails and also how much they value the natural environment in their experience. So I certainly don't believe that, or I believe that the majority of outdoor users really is looking for something different than just to use nature as only their playground, and I think they actually also appreciate it. But of course, that doesn't mean that all users have a clear and detailed understanding of how their activities unintentionally can impact ecosystems. And I think this creates a little bit of a gap sometimes between users and nature protectionists. And I would like to give some suggestions or on how we can start bridging that gap maybe. First of all, I think it's very important to educate recreational users on the code of conduct that they're supposed to stick to in natural environments. I think there's a lot of users that don't know these rules or very well. And I think with the heightened recreational pressure due to the pandemic, I think we have a bit more new users that might have not heard about these rules. So I think that's very important for managers to try to educate these users. Secondly, I think it's important to engage our recreational users to aid in both nature management works and trail maintenance works, because I think that heightens the respect and the understanding of that they are guests basically in these ecosystems and what needs to be done to be able to give them their playground, let's say. Another important thing that I think land managers should try to do is to design smart trail systems that direct the pressure away from the most sensitive areas by building attractive trails in parts that are less high risk. And it's very important that this trail meets the needs of the users, which is why it's important to involve all user groups in a planning process and actually listen to their needs. And to conclude, maybe I hope that we can work on building positive and mutually respectful relationships between land managers and recreational users. Thank you.
Lisa, thank you very much for those very thoughtful words. And yes, absolutely. I think our outdoor sports people are very much an integral part of the visitors to any protected area. You know, they want to connect to the landscape and experience it. But of course, often these are very much individual activities that are taking place in a collective space. One biker, one hiker isn't necessarily an issue. They don't see the 500 people that are coming behind them. So, but thank you also for reminding us about those very positive aspects just at the end of your presentation there. And the C project under which this webinar is being presented. I think we'll hear a little bit more about that just in the next wee while. But absolutely, educating, engaging and building trust and partnerships and relationships, I think absolutely has to be the fundamental way forward. So thank you very much for introducing us to those thoughts. I see some questions are appearing in the chat. We will gather up your questions and bring them to our speakers once we've heard from all the speakers. So if anything else comes to mind out there in the tent, please stick your questions or comments into the chat and we'll gather them up for later. So thank you, Lisa. So speaking of engaging and educating and building trust, I'd like to move to Daniele Piazza. He's the director of the Ossola Protected Area in Italy. He's also, their park is also a very proud holder of the European Charter for Sustainable Tourism in Protected Areas, which is an award given by the EUROPARC Federation. But it means that as a park and as a community, they're committed to a partnership approach to welcoming visitors to their areas, in finding shared goals and a common vision with all the community, with the businesses, and of course with the outdoor sports users as well. Now, he's been closely involved in social innovation projects for many years in alpine communities. And today, I think, Danielle, you will be inviting us to become part of the mountain. So I hand over to you, Danielle, to share your experience with us.
Thank you, Carol. I'm going to share my screen first. Okay, I hope everything works. Thank you for inviting me. Good morning to everybody. I'm very glad to have the chance to talk about the ResiChat project. And first of all, my name is Daniele Piazza, and I am the director of the protected areas of Ossola since March 2020. So it's just 1 year I'm joining this new experience. And the protected areas of Ossola are in charge of management of 2 natural parks in the Italian Western Alps in Piedmont, the Alta Valle Antrona Natural Park and the Veglia d'Evero Natural Parks. As Carol said before, the two parks also happen to be Natura 2000 sites, and the Vegliadevero Natural Park is also part of the transboundary park network with our Swiss neighbor, Bintal Landschaft Park. Especially the Vegliadevero area is a very attractive site for outdoor practitioners all year round, and we have been witnessing an increase in the number of visitors throughout the years and also during the last pandemic period.
Danielle, may I just interrupt you just for a few
Yes.
seconds? I think the internet connection has just dropped a little bit at your place. Do you mind if you stop sharing screen and we'll show the presentation from our end, and you can just when you want the slides to go forward?
Okay.
Because no, we can't read the slides at all. So if you just stop sharing screens and we'll restart the presentation, and we'll put that up for you if that's okay, Misha and Teresa, you can manage that. And then just let us know when you want to move on with the slides, and then we can save your bandwidth for hearing your voice.
Okay.
So if just give us 1
otherwise,
second, we'll just get that reset up for you, and everyone can enjoy your presentation. So just give us a wee second to get that set up.
Okay, I can also switch my camera off.
No, I think we'd rather see you. We can manage the presentation from.
Okay.
From I don't know if we're managing it from Germany or Czech Republic or Spain, because we have
Czech Republic
Czech,
here.
yeah, so it's flown all the way over to the Czech Republic, and we'll show it from there, which just goes to show how international our community is here. We're all over Europe, and I think maybe even further afield. Do you find, whilst we're just doing that, Daniel, I'll just take this opportunity, do you find that having the Charter for Sustainable Tourism has given you that platform, that space to create that engagement with different stakeholders?
Yes, of course. We have been working through the ResiChat project and also through the Charter, also activating the second phase of the Charter and involving local operators in our strategy.
Great. Well, we're delighted to have you as part of our Charter community. So I think we're back and up and running, and we can basically pick up where you left off. You should be able to see the presentation on the screen now, and as I say, just indicate when you want the slides to move forward, and we can all sit back and enjoy your presentation now. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, so as I was saying, since 2018, we are involved in the ResiChat project, which is a joint initiative aimed at tackling the issue of impacts of recreational activities on environment through an integrated approach, which will be presented during the speech. We are working with the CIPRA, which is the International Commission for the Protection of the Alps. Of course, we are working with EUROPARC through the Charter and also activating the second phase. And we are also a member of the Be Part of the Mountain Network, which is a network of alpine protected areas dealing with recreational activities and impacts on environment in a project led by Alparc, which is the Alpine Protected Areas Network based in France. So we can switch to the next slide. Thank you. As I said before, our starting point was that throughout the Alps, tourism trends and outdoor practices have significantly increased the number of visitors accessing protected areas. This also happens in our natural parks. We have some 200,000 visitors per year only in the Vegliadevero area, all year round. So during summer and winter, but also during spring and autumn. These represent, of course, opportunities for local tourism, but also an increase in the impact of these activities on wildlife and ecosystems. And also the COVID crisis boosted the interest of people in outdoor activities, especially during the last summer. So the ResiChat project associates different stakeholders of the local tourism sector through the European Charter for Sustainable Tourism in the Ossola protected areas and builds on a path of awareness and sustainable management. And also the commitment of the operators involved leads to engagement and certification of operators in the phase two, in the second phase of the Charter. we can move to the next slide. Okay, this is a scheme aimed at showing how the ResiChess project is working. We began from monitoring, carrying out a survey since 2018 and also in 2020 by means of interview and questionnaires for visitors who visited the area during winter or summer. And then we have a planning phase, which is still ongoing and which is a very delicate phase, as Lisa had the chance to say during her speech. And we obviously run communication campaigns via web, social media, magazines, and also guides, books, leaflets, and posters. And we also started some awareness raising and training activities, which were unfortunately hindered by the COVID crisis because we couldn't set up many meetings. We were basing our activities on face-to-face meetings, and we had to quit the most of these activities because of the COVID restrictions. Okay, we can move to the next slide. As I said before, the starting point was to let visitors have their say in this management strategy. The starting point of the activity was monitoring and surveying. We collected more than 750 questionnaires during 2020, another 715 questionnaires during 2018 for over 1,500 questionnaires collected so far. By means of face-to-face interview on site, despite the COVID restrictions and bad weather conditions all year round. We asked about 15 different questions to our visitors. Some of them were directly related to impacts of recreational activities on the environment, and also asking for, let's say, the perception of the impact caused by recreational activities to the visitors. You can see the chart, I think. Okay, we can move to the next slide. The next step is planning and also regulation and setting up of quiet zones in which further recommendations are applied. And this is a very delicate process, which is still under construction, it's still ongoing, because we are working closely with local stakeholders. I think this step requires a long time and preparation, and also the widest participation possible. And we are involving in this phase local committees, boards, also alpine clubs, and of course, operators involved in the European Charter for Sustainable Tourism and operators dealing with the second phase of the Charter. For those who don't know, the second phase of the Charter involves a kind of certification of operators which become a sort of contractors or partners of the protected areas in the sustainable management of the tourism sector. What is shown in this slide is a board, a panel, showing some recommendations and also some rules, and also some quiet zones in which dedicated trails and paths are set up in collaboration with local alpine guides and local operators. We are still working on this, and we expect these panels and maps to be set up on the territory by the end of next summer. Okay, we can move to the next slide. We also launched an information campaign in 2 languages, Italian and English, based on the findings of the survey we have been carrying out with the collaboration of visitors, so that we could provide some simple and very effective recommendation and rules both for summer and winter periods, which are very different in terms of impacts. During winter, the activities are backcountry skiing, snowshoeing, and also free riding in some way. And during summer, the most important outdoor activity is hiking, also trekking, and a bit of alpinism, but it's not the most important activity in these protected areas. We also run a social media campaign by means of Facebook, Instagrams, and social media channels we usually use for our information activities. There's also a dedicated section of our website dedicated to the ResistChats project. And there's also an Alpine-wide website, which is called Be Part of the Mountain, in which all of the local activities run by protected areas of the Alpine area are collected. And yes, we also produced some video clips. At the end of my presentation, I will show you one dedicated to information and awareness raising towards winter practitioners. Okay, we can move to the next slide. As I said before, we also launched awareness raising and training activities, unfortunately hindered by the COVID crisis. But anyway, we were able to run some workshops and on-site activities involving visitors, but also local operators as mountain guides and natural guides and hotels and nuts. We launched also online training by means of webinars and online meetings. And of course, the involvement of local stakeholders through the European Charter for Sustainable Tourism. The second phase was launched in 2019, and now we have 13 certified operators. We can move to the next slide. Okay, come to some findings as conclusions. Of course, the COVID-19 crisis boosted the interest of visitors in protected areas as natural safe spaces providing natural social distancing. And from my point of view, this will most likely be a long-lasting trend for the years to come. We expect more and more visitors to access our natural areas. Secondly, the COVID-19 crisis boosted the interest of outdoor practitioners in outdoor activities also. Let's think about the lockdown of ski resorts during the last winter, which probably shifted the interest of many practitioners towards new disciplines or new outdoor sports. For example, ski mountaineering, backcountry skiing, snowshoeing, because people who couldn't join the ski resorts simply shifted to new activities. And this is also most likely a long-lasting trend for the years to come. We expect more and more practitioners, especially during winters in our protected areas. We found out that probably the best way to deal with recreational activities and impacts on environment is a blend of regulation and recommendation or spontaneous behavioral changes, because we really think that people and visitors are willing to participate. They just need to be informed and aware of the potential impacts of their activities. But once they find out they may help, they really do. I think we need more cooperation and sharing among protected areas in order to let natural parks and Natura 2000 sites speak with one voice, so that visitors may find the same rules or the same recommendation throughout protected areas of the European space. And well, that's it. I would like to say only that building collaborative paths needs a lot of time. And so these processes are quite time consuming. We can't expect such a strategy to be set up and running in, let's say, 1 year. It would rather take 3 to 5 years in order to to be effective and active on a territory. And well, that's it. There's just the last slide with some for further content. And if it's possible, I will ask Michaela to show the video on YouTube, which is a teaser of the Be Part of the Mountain campaign.
Thank you, Danielle. Yep, I'm hoping we can see that video now.
Thank you.
I invite everybody to sit back and be part of the mountain. Great, thank you very much for sharing that, Danielle. We'll definitely put the link up so that if you want to go to YouTube, everyone, you can watch it for yourself. And it certainly has a very powerful and important message. So Daniel, thank you again. I think I really enjoyed you presenting us at the beginning with that's a model for us all to apply. And that your model really started with gathering information and data from the people who are affected by whatever it is, by these activities. And I think we'll have some news for everyone in the room about how they can help contribute to our project, gathering some important information about outdoor sports and protected areas. So thank you for that reminder. And that 70% of the people in your survey thought that there was an impact of recreational activities in the area. And thank you too for sharing your experience of the Charter for Sustainable Tourism, into which the outdoor sports are very welcome and able to engage with the whole community and all other stakeholders involved in active participation in your protected areas. The Charter for Sustainable Tourism started with the survey, with some data collection, and a report that we produced almost 25 years ago called Loving Them to Death. And here we are 25 years later, still considering that same issue. Perhaps we're now just kind of enjoying nature to its demise rather than loving it to death, but still we have an issue and a bridge to gap, as Lisa reminded us earlier. And I think being consistent in our communications, I think, is extremely important. And again, I hope that our C project that we'll be discussing just shortly will help also for us to think about that, both from the outdoor sports perspective and from the protected areas perspective. And I do hope that we will all now be inspired to be part of the mountain and understand that the interaction that we have with the nature that's often quite unseen. We might not see the impacts that we're having, but we do need to understand that they're there. So as I say, the link will be available in the chat, plus we'll be posting everything after the webinar is finished. So please go onto YouTube and enjoy that video for yourselves. Okay, thank you, Daniel. I'm moving on to our final speaker on the topic for this morning, and that's Miles Fernback. And Miles is not far from me here in Scotland. And adventure guides, I think, have the great job and the great pleasure to take people into some of the world's wildest places. And that's what Miles has been doing for the last 30 years. He's also, been a trainer, a consultant, a lecturer, and he's used all of that experience to help create the adventure travel guide standards, which will bring together not just those professional skills that are needed by the guides, but also making sure that what adventure guides are doing is being done sustainably. So Miles, can you perhaps tell us how that will help us in our project on sustainability and environmental education in outdoor sports? Miles.
Thanks a lot, Carol, and a pleasure to be here. And thanks very much for inviting me to speak. I'll pop my slides up in a moment. But I guess following the theme of our own engagement, Carol has said, I've had the pleasure of being able to guide people in the outdoors all over the world, from Antarctica to Greenland and many places in between. And I guess I began life very much with a mountain focus and a rock climbing focus. And I still do guide in the mountains from time to time. But I guess in the last 20 years, I've become much more of a water-based person. And as a sailor, a sea kayaker, and a canoe guide, I've had the pleasure of, engaging people with our wonderful lochs and rivers and, the ocean. I also do occasionally get out on a bike, and it's for my own enjoyment, but I have also done a bit of guiding on both mountain and road bikes. So I will pop my slides up. Let's just make sure this is. So can I just get a thumbs up from someone that you can see my first slide? Okay, brilliant, thank you. So yes, today I'm going to talk to you about the Adventure Travel Guide Standard. And it's something that's been around now since 2016, and the second edition has just been published in February of this year. And I sit on the governance board, which I'll tell you a little bit about towards the end of the presentation, and I'm the UK representative on the governance board. But my day job, as well as doing quite a lot of guiding work, I also coordinate the work of a charity called the Wilderness Foundation UK, and I coordinate the work in Scotland. The head office is in England. And our focus really there is very much around nature-based therapy and adventure therapy. So we're working with health and well-being and mental health, and our trails are all led by adventure guides like me and qualified therapists who are trained in taking therapy outdoors. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a little bit about how the ATGS came to be, a little bit about the background. Then I'll dive into an overview of the content. And then, because of the nature of this particular webinar, I'm going to focus on the sustainability competency. And I had the pleasure of leading the team that wrote that particular part of the document. And I worked with some fantastic people, Rafa from Chile and Haley from Montenegro, in putting that together. And I also was one of the editorial team looking at the overall document. And because of my kind of academic background, I also ended up doing the reference section, which wasn't the most exciting part of it, but a very important part of it. We'll then look briefly at how to use it, and I'll give you a few examples of how I have used the standard in various different ways, from individual guides and supporting their development to more strategic engagement. And then just to touch on how the standard is promoted, how its outreach works, and how the governance board works, and an invitation for all of you to engage with the standard. So why do we need adventure travel guide standards? And I guess one of a number of answers to that question is that there is such a range of skills that are required for somebody to be a really good, competent adventure guide working in our wild places. And not only that, the range of training that's available and the qualifications as well vary dramatically around the world. Some countries have really well established governing bodies and qualification systems, and other countries don't have any of that, and it's based on experience and local knowledge. And so the idea of the document was really to try and bring together a discussion document which brought all of those things into focus. So it's not saying that you have to have qualifications. obviously they have value, but where they don't exist, what are the skills and the training and competencies that guides need to operate safely and to offer high quality experiences? Guides and the role of the guide has really evolved. At one point, it was very much just taking people from one place to the other with relatively little interaction, just getting them there from one place to the other fairly safely. But now we're very much looking at connecting people deeply with the place and the story of the destinations, and linking into the kind of life experience and aspirations of the travelers that travel with us. So these things there's been very much an evolution of those sorts of things and what people are looking for. I guess it's fair to say that a really good guide, an excellent guide in one location can really raise the bar and provide a real great example for us all to aspire to. But equally, we shouldn't deny that a less competent guide can also impact people's view of adventure travel experiences as a whole. And this is something very close to my heart, as I'm very keen on all the activities, but I would say that for me, it's not so much that I see myself as a sea kayak guide. I see myself as a guide to the places around the world that I've had the pleasure of taking people to, and it happens to be on this particular occasion that we're using sea kayaks to get around and travel and explore those places. I mean, I do get involved in training guides and people in the technical side of it, but in terms of my guiding, my focus is on connecting people with place and experience through whatever activity we might be doing. And I guess the situations that we find ourselves in, clearly the COVID crisis has been mentioned already. The sort of values that underpin the Adventure Travel Guide standard are really part of discussions and an antidote to some of the world's most vexing problems. So things like the climate emergency, things like biodiversity loss, and many other aspects. So why do these standards matter? Adventure travel is growing and has been growing year on year. And obviously there's been a somewhat of a hiccup in the last year or so, but essentially it's likely to continue. And as has been alluded to by the other speakers, there are more and more people now having been locked down and having had something taken away from them that maybe they only engaged with a little bit, maybe they didn't even engage with at all, but suddenly the recognition of the value of that, and more people now, many of whom have got quite limited amounts of experience, are wanting to travel and to explore these wild places. There's more and more businesses. Obviously, some sadly have found it really difficult to survive through this last year, but the likelihood is that many of those businesses will be able to reinvent themselves, and there will continue to be lots of opportunity. And one of the things that's evolved significantly is customers have a much higher expectation of their guides, of the travel companies that they engage with, and the locations that they travel to. They also matter because of safety. I mean, this is obvious, but something that we shouldn't lose sight of, whether that be through government regulations or perhaps where they exist, national governing bodies for particular activities. The safety aspect is really important. We obviously, accidents are something that we wish to avoid for all sorts of reasons, obvious reasons. And then clearly, for us to operate, we live in a world where the insurance side of it, the litigation side of it, is a reality that we all have to be mindful of. So the standards help support that dialogue and reassure both the customer, the insurer, and everyone involved. They also matter because of sustainability. Travel now as a whole is really under scrutiny in terms of the impacts on the community and the environment. And so really sustainability being front and center of everything that we do in this space, and the way we operate, the way we plan, every aspect of what we do, every aspect of the customer journey needs to be focusing on the sustainability side of things. So the Adventure Travel Guide Standard began in 2014 when there was a working group with people from 18 countries, and it was supported by the Adventure Travel Trade Association, which I'm sure many of you will have come across. It's a global trade. It's a global trade body for adventure travel businesses. And it took us, I was part of that first working group, and it took us about 10 months, and we produced the first, and it was slightly different name. It was called the International Adventure Travel Guide Standard, and that was published in early 2016. And we agreed at the time that we would do a revision after 3 years, and it's actually taken us a little bit longer. COVID, in some ways, you know, there aren't many blessings coming out of what we've all experienced over the last year, but one of them was that many of us had a little bit more time to engage in the rewrite and the creation of the second edition, which has only just been published in February of this year. Something that's new in this standard, the second edition, is that there are 3 core responsibilities that are highlighted at the beginning of the document around what's important for an adventure travel guide. And so, for example, adventure travel depends upon really vibrant and resilient communities, ecosystems, landscapes. And the adventure travel participants, as I was saying, they expect to participate in adventure travel activities that are protected from negative social and environmental impacts from the travel experience that they're part of. And that's becoming more and more important to the customer. And so adventure travel guides do play a fundamental role in both safeguarding environmental, social and economic sustainability for the communities, the human and the other than human communities, and the ecosystems where the guiding and other activities take place. So sustainability at the top there is key. Safety, of course, while there's an inherent risk to traveling, and especially with adventure travel, a guide must be constantly aware of this, and their role of minimizing the likelihood of accidents and incidents is crucial. And also if something does happen, because one of the aspects of adventure is that the outcome of real adventure is uncertain, and there are always things that can happen, but obviously you try and prevent those. But when something does happen, they have the appropriate skills in terms of understanding of safety protocols and rescue protocols and so on to be able to manage that. This is a key part that's relatively new in terms of our exploration of it within the standard, is the notion of quality and meaning. And we've talked about, you know, the potential both positive and negative aspects of the travel, but at the same time as that, travelers' expectations of quality. What does 5-star quality look like in an outdoor context? We know what it might look like in a restaurant context or perhaps in a hotel context, but what does it look like on the side of a mountain or in a cave, or as we sea kayak around the coast? And so this customer service considerations in adventure travel, combined with that increased emphasis on sharing meaningful content, we're hopefully providing opportunities for transformational experience. And so that's a key part of it. So how might we use the Adventure Travel Guide Standard? It could be at the individual guide level. I'm work as a volunteer really for the Institute for Outdoor Learning as part of the professional development side of what they do. It's a national body in the UK, and there are different levels of professional development training that people can undertake to receive an accreditation. And I use the Adventure Travel Guide Standard as a talking point. It's something that people can reflect on in terms of their own career development, look at the different aspects of it and use it as a tool to, you know, for career reflection and their professional development journey. Certainly when it comes to different businesses, they can engage with it. For 15 years until recently, I was working as the head of guides and training for an adventure travel company called Wilderness Scotland. And we have used the Adventure Travel Guide Standard as a template for our own guide training. So what we actually provide in terms of training for our guides is based on the different core competencies, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about in a minute. I have been a reluctant academic. I've taught on an adventure tourism undergraduate and a marine and coastal tourism undergraduate course, as well as a master's in ecotourism. And I use the Adventure Travel Guide Standard in a second year module to introduce it so that people got an understanding of what was involved in working in the outdoors, but also then as a fourth year module for people towards the end of their degree, where they were using it on a critical perspectives module to really kind of start to look at, well, how does that compare with what's going on in reality? What are businesses doing in relation to these things? And also there's opportunities to share this kind of work through the press. I've been fortunate to be asked to write a piece for a new book that's coming out later this year, called The Adventure Tourist, Being, Knowing and Becoming. And I've also had the opportunity to write a couple of articles for magazines that talk about the importance of the qualifications and training standards for guides. Then you've got trade bodies and destination management organisations who can also use the standard. And I've had the pleasure of working with Carol with the trade body in Scotland. It's called Wild Scotland, which represents nature and adventure businesses. And she and I have been helping work on some best practice guidance and looking at the principles and the kind of background to what's important in that kind of work. And we've used, during that process, we used the Adventure Travel Guide Standard as a little bit of a framework, as a reference point in terms of what we were doing. And then at a strategic level, I'm here. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm talking to you guys from the EUROPARC Federation and the European Network of Outdoor Sports. And hopefully the Adventure Travel Guide Standard, and particularly some of the work we've done around sustainability, may also align with the work of the SEE project as it moves forward. So, and here we have the 5 core competencies. So we had the 3 core responsibilities that I've already mentioned, and then we move into the more detailed aspects, which forms the bulk of the document, where we look at the 5 core competencies. Sustainability I'm going to focus on in a bit more detail in a moment, but the technical skills and first aid. First aid is obvious, and obviously the nature of the type of first aid you do depends on how far away you are from definitive care. You may only need to do a short course, or you may need to do something like a wilderness first responder. And then if there are technical trainings in the activities, there are those sorts of things. But if there are not, it's focusing on what are the skills that are important. Things like navigation, understanding weather and meteorology, being able to interpret natural phenomena, how do you use equipment and vehicles safely. All of these kind of things are incorporated in that second competency. Then looking at safety and risk management. So undertaking a risk inventory, doing risk assessments, analysis, and how you manage and treat those risks. Have you got an emergency action plan? Have you got standard operating procedures? These kind of things. And also in the standard, we referenced in this area particularly, but also in 1 or 2 other areas, the ISO standards. There is an ISO standard, it's 21101, and the ISO standard for adventure tourism, and we use that. And that has a key focus around safety and risk management, which we looked at. But this is perhaps, these last 2, the customer service and group management and the natural and cultural history interpretation, along with sustainability, are perhaps what make the Adventure Travel Guide Standard different from something like the ISOs, which the ISOs would probably have a much greater focus around points 2 and 3 here. But we wanted to bring a much more holistic view and recognize these other documents and aspects, but also to look at some of these other things. As I said before, what does 5-star customer service in an outdoor context look like? How do we manage, but not just manage, how do we aim to exceed the expectations of our customers? Then how do we act as a host? Hospitality is crucial. How do we act as an advocate for past generations, future generations, for the animals and plants and trees that don't have a voice? A guide has a role to speak for all of these things when they're sharing these experiences and activities. And a big part of that comes through the natural and cultural history, the storytelling, the content delivery, how you deliver it, when you deliver it. Things like folklore, the history, the flora and fauna. We're looking to forge emotional connections and potentially transformational experience. So it's about authenticity. And also many of these issues that you're talking to your guests about are controversial. So it's important that you present a balanced picture. Land management issues are not always simple. You know, there are often many sides and perspectives. So I'm going to move on as I'm coming towards the end of my presentation to look at sustainability. And I'm going to read you, and I hope you don't mind, I'm going to actually read you a little bit that comes out of the beginning of the sustainability section within the Adventure Travel Guide Standard. The rapid growth of global travel in recent decades has also contributed to an increase in impacts, both positive and negative. According to a study published in 2018, tourism accounts for 8% of global emissions, with air travel being a major component. Development for tourism can also lead to urban sprawl and the destruction of critical wildlife habitats. Irresponsible destination management can have a devastating impact on local communities and residents. Intricately interwoven, the climate emergency and biodiversity crisis are no longer disputable. Atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased 25% in the last 50 years, and species are being lost at 1,000 times their natural rate. According to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN, we are witnessing the greatest mass extinction crisis since dinosaurs disappeared from our planet 65 million years ago. However, don't give up, don't despair. Sustainably carried out adventure travel can be a positive force as well. In many parts of the world, tourism offers the financial incentive that persuades communities and governments to halt destructive development like mining, intensive agriculture, or logging. And besides tourism having a role in securing environmental protection, the most responsible experiences recognize that local communities must be empowered too. Operators should strive to not only equip local people with the skills and resources to deliver meaningful travel experiences, but to also ensure that tourism revenues remain in the local economy. Having less of an impact is no longer enough. To be truly sustainable, our travel experiences must contribute to solving environmental and societal problems. So these are a few headlines within the document. So impacts. So not only are we looking to minimize, but wherever possible to remove those impacts or reduce them to as small as possible. And the Leave No Trace organization and the training process that is provided, a global training process, is really important, and that's highlighted in the standard as a particular approach. And I'm a master educator for Leave No Trace, and it's something that I share not only in training but also whenever I'm out with my clients, by example as well as through conversation. Things like respecting the local communities and the issues like over-tourism. Wherever we can, relating the local to the global and bringing some of those big issues, which can be really overwhelming for all of us, and including our clients, the climate emergency and biodiversity loss. There's a focus on human and animal rights and welfare, whether they be wild animals or animals that are sometimes used in tourism, for example, donkeys in mountain tourism in many parts of the world. Thinking about avoiding plastic, and especially single-use plastic, removing that, because that's become a big focus that we're all aware of. And wherever we can, we're looking to have an opportunity to educate, not to preach, but at the same time for our clients to be able to enter into some of the issues and challenges, the potentials and possibilities in a balanced way, and to come out of that with their own opinion, for having formed their own opinion. So the governance board is a voluntary group. So as I said, I'm the UK representative on the governance board, and it's made up of guides and adventure travel professionals from, as it stands, about 40 different countries around the world. And the idea is to oversee and develop and promote the standard. And we've just produced the 2nd edition. And so in 2026, we'll be looking for the 3rd edition. So please do engage with it. If it's useful, find out what works for you, give us feedback, because that will also be something we will be looking for when it comes to rewriting it in 5 years' time. And we do aspire to have representation on all 7 continents. We're not there yet, but it would be great. And if anyone on this webinar is interested in potentially, or knows someone that might be interested in engaging with the governance board, then please do get in contact. As an individual guide, or as a business, or as a destination management organization, or an adventure travel, an academic institution, any of these, anyone involved in adventure travel, you can sign up. It's not managed, it's not inspected, in the sense that this is not something that you can get a certification in, although there is some training around it. This is an aspirational document. It's a conversation promoter. And so it's not enforced in any way, but you can sign up to say that you aspire to the values and the content of the standard. And it's very straightforward, and you can do it through that link. Other ways you might want to engage are through Facebook, perhaps talking to your guides about it, sharing it with your guides, as I said, joining the governance board, hosting events where it can be something that you can talk about. we're translating the standard into Spanish. The second edition is being translated into Spanish as we speak, but it would be wonderful to have some other people engage with us to help us translate into other languages. And training materials, perhaps, that are informed by the standard. We're looking to share as widely as we possibly can to help everyone's practice improve. And as I said, we're looking for feedback. So it would be rude of me not to just bring this slide up quickly. Some of these people you may know, many you don't, but this is the team of people that have brought the standard that you have access to now, have put it together over the last couple of years. And I just want to say a big thank you to all of them. And it's been a pleasure working with them. And thank you all very much for listening. That's me.
Thank you very much, Miles. Much appreciated. And that standard, although geared towards adventure travel guides, of course, I think for the outdoor sports community, there's a model there, and there's a lot we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. And I think there's a lot there we can learn from and use in the training of our outdoor sports leaders, and indeed for outdoor sports participants themselves. Now, Miles, you also reminded us of, brought us right up to date in terms of where we are in the COVID situation, and Danielle and Lisa mentioned that too. And I think the COVID pandemic that we're all still living in, it's not over yet, really has brought that connection and indeed the disconnection of people and nature into sharp focus. Thank you again for reminding us that the biodiversity and climate change crisis that we're facing is now, not something that's going to affect us in the future. It's something that's happening now. And there is no vaccine for biodiversity loss and climate change. And it is impacting our nature. And of course, it will impact, therefore, the outdoor sports for the people who want to take part in them in these landscapes. So the time is now for positive action and for change, both individual behavioural change and sectorial change to take place. So the training of outdoor sports leaders and engagement with the community and protected areas, I think, is something that's has already started, but needs to gain pace now. And I think the outdoor guide standards, will be an excellent contribution to our thinking on that. So I promised the room that you'd have a chance to ask some questions to our panelists, to our speakers today. And Teresa from EUROPARC, I know, has been monitoring the chat. Teresa, could you perhaps indicate some of the questions that have been coming forward? And if we've got a few minutes, I might even invite some of the participants to ask the questions themselves. So Teresa, over to you for some questions that have come from the chat.
Yes, there were so many that it was hard to do a presentation, but here they are. So first question for Lisa. What do you think? Is it better to build specific trails for mountain bikes or to continue using the ones who are already eroded?
Yes, thank you, Teresa. That kind of depends on the situation, I would say. I think the best way forward, wherever that's possible, is to build attractive mountain bike trails that are designated for mountain bikers or can be shared use, but that are constructed in a way that they are sustainable, but also meet the needs of the users. So with technical trail features, flowy, whatever your users require. However, I think the purpose of these trails is to direct most of the pressure away from the rest of the area. So the idea is to make them interesting enough so that most users will want to use these trails. I don't think in most areas the only solution is to build one trail and then try to only permit your users to use these ones, but it totally depends on the sensitivity of the area, of the species and the habitats that are there. So not one question, just do enough research, know your area, and try to minimize impact in a way that users are happy and land managers do, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. There is another question for you. It's more a common question. So what do you see the difference between promoting quieter outdoor activities, natural therapies, natural immersion, forest bathing, as opposed to the outdoor sports, in the sense to raise awareness that people that we belong to nature?
Could we address that could each of the panelists maybe take a moment to consider a response to that question? That will be our final question, because there were so many questions, we just can't take them all, but for sure we will.
Would you mind repeating that just for me?
Sorry, if you could just repeat the question and all the speakers
yes.
address it.
To see what is your opinion, what should be more promoted, quieter outdoors activities like forest bathing, natural therapies, natural immersion, as opposed to outdoor sports? If we want to raise the awareness about good behavior, people in nature.
Happy to go first, if you like.
Miles, please, yeah.
It's a really good question. And I imagine anecdotally, although the science is now there to support it, but we all probably recognize ourselves that there is a therapeutic benefit to time spent outdoors, engaging with nature in whatever form, whether that be high energy adrenaline or whether it be just going for a gentle walk. And then there is the more formal therapeutic approach, such as, ecotherapy. And I'm actually partway through doing a forest bathing therapist training myself, because it's something that I'm going to be doing more of. And that's moving into a formal, where the therapeutic has the capital T and people are coming for an overtly therapeutic experience. So really, in many ways, it's happening on both formally and informally. And so I guess in many ways, I'm not sure it's terribly helpful for us to decide which is better. I mean, clearly, the mental health and well-being, as well as our physical health, has been really brought into sharp focus with us all being locked down recently. And the work I'm doing with school children, the caseloads of teachers and support workers in schools has quadrupled in the last year. Kids that have never come to speak to them are now coming. And, engaging with nature, which has not been possible for people, whether that be local, but it can happen on every level, from engagement with a bird box on your windowsill to engagement with wild and wilderness areas. So I think it's not a question of either or, it's a question of both have their value and are very important.
Thank you, Miles. I like your suggestion as well, Thomas. We can go for a bike ride and have some forest bathing at the end. Lovely suggestion. Daniel, would you like to add some thoughts from the protected area perspective on these different activities?
Yes, of course. I totally agree with Miles, but I also believe that these promotions or these proposals may refer to different publics. I mean, there are sporty people who are really interested in performances, also in more, let's say, almost professional activities, and other people who are interested in the natural aspects or in more aspects related to leisure and well-being. And so we should promote both these aspects, but it may be somehow difficult to reach different targets by the same promotion channels. This is our finding. And we are also involved right now in an alpine space project, which is called HELPS, which is actually dealing with outdoor activities and tourism and health benefits. So it is I would say, a trend topic on which we should work during the next years, also because of the effects of the pandemic, which will probably lead more and more people to protected areas as natural, safe places in which to spend time and also to gain health and well-being.
Great, thank you, Danielle. And just as a footnote, EUROPARC launched last year and also again this year our Healthy Parks, Healthy People programme, which is very much about helping to reconnect people with nature in these shared spaces. So anyone interested in that, please pop onto our website. You can find more information about it there. Lisa, do you have any very last quick words on this before I bring in Mike McClure to help us talk about our project, what we're going to be doing about it?
Yeah, I would just like to add that I agree with what's been previously said on this topic. I think every user should be able to enjoy the natural environment in the way that they prefer. And I think we can minimize the impact of all these activities by being smart as nature managers and while designing our trail systems to minimize pressure on the most sensitive landscapes.
Good. A lot food for thought there for all of us to think about how we will take some positive action in the future. So speaking of positive action, EUROPARC was absolutely delighted to be invited and be able to join their new Erasmus Plus project, SEE, Sustainability for Environmental Education and Outdoor Sports. And I'd like to invite Mike McClure from Sport Northern Ireland to tell us more about it.
Great, thanks, Carol. Just check, can everybody see my screen okay? If somebody gives me a thumbs up, perfect. Okay, so it's great to be part of this webinar this morning. I've really enjoyed listening to what I've heard so far, and what we're going to do now is just give you a little bit of insight. It'll be very short into the SEE project. So the SEE project was developed by the European Network for Outdoor Sports. The network is a partnership for a bit like EUROPARC Federation in some ways, not quite as big, but we're a network of those who are involved in outdoor sports at a European level and at national level, and we work together to promote the importance of outdoor sports. So as Carol mentioned, I'm based in Northern Ireland. This photograph on the screen was my walk yesterday morning. I'm based in South Down in Northern Ireland beside the Mourne Mountains, which is a protected area as well. And so I live and work in an area that we've been talking about this morning. So ENOS brought together the partners for this project, and as well as working for Sport Northern Ireland, I'm the voluntary chairman of ENOS as well. So do feel free to connect with me. I left my email address on the screen as well earlier on. So a little bit about the SEE project. The whole aim of the project is to develop knowledge and awareness for outdoor sports leaders, instructors, guides, the very people Miles was talking about who take others into the natural environment. And we're particularly interested in working with outdoor sports federations at a European level. The lead partner has been mentioned is Leave No Trace Ireland, and they're taking the lead. But we have 9 other partners involved in the project. 2 of those partners are state agencies that develop outdoor sports at a state level. 2 partners are from universities and colleges who are involved in the training of outdoor sports leaders and teachers. 2 partners are from local sports clubs. And we also have a regional development agency as well. So we've really a broad spectrum of organizations involved in this project, which I think brings real value to it in itself. We're not just about the focus being on the sort of sports federations. We bring that breadth. And combined with that, then we have 2 pan-European organizations, and obviously EUROPARC is one of those partner organizations. And ENOS has been working with EUROPARC now for really since its formation in 2013. We've been working fairly closely. Carol was actually involved at our first conference, and so that connection between the places that we use and the people who manage those and the people who actually participate in the outdoor sports is really important for us, and it's critical that we keep those connections together. So it's great to have a formal project where we work together on this. So what is the project all about? We have a number of elements to it, and the first stage that we're just starting with now is our research element, and there'll be a little bit more about that shortly. So we're just finding out what happens in some of the national parks and the protected areas, and also what the sports federations do. We then spend a bit of time learning and sharing knowledge amongst the partners and exploring what actually goes on in each of the partner countries in terms of environmental education for outdoor sports leaders. And that will allow us then to develop a toolkit that we'll promote to the sports federations across Europe. we'll then test that toolkit with a number of case studies, and finally we'll promote and disseminate that knowledge across the sector. And ENOS will be right at the heart of that dissemination as we work closely with a number of sports federations across Europe. So in terms of the research element, there are 4 key elements to this. So the first part is to survey many of you who are here involved in this webinar to understand what the usage of your protected area is by outdoor sports participants, but also to try and find out how that is managed and what some of the issues are. And maybe as well, what are the good practices that actually are working well for you? And we've heard a little bit about that this morning. So we want to delve into that in a little bit more detail and find out what works well in your area. But aligned to that, we're also surveying the outdoor sports federations across Europe and trying to find out what their training systems are. So how do they actually run training to qualify leaders and instructors and guides to take people into the outdoors? And Miles has actually alluded to that quite a lot in his presentation. So what we're doing is trying to find out what do they actually do in terms of the training that they do. And then what percentage and what level of training is given over to environmental education systems within the training programs that you run. So my background is very much as a kayaker and a canoeist. And so how much time do I devote when I'm training others to be leaders and to technical issues, to safety issues, but then to environmental issues that may have an impact on, or that the kayaker might have an impact on the environment. And then we're going to really look for examples of good practice. We're doing that globally. We're not just restricting it to Europe. We want to find out some examples of good practice across the world that we can bring into the toolkit. So that's the research element. I'll not go into all of the elements in detail because we don't have time. We'll maybe run another webinar in the future where we talk through some of those other opportunities. But initially, the first survey is just being launched today, and the link will be there, and I know it'll be sent out to all the members as well. And this is where we'll be trying to delve into the good practices and the issues that you're facing in your local protected areas. So that gives you a little bit of insight into what the project is about. Thanks very much, Carol.
Thank you very much, Mike. So the survey is now open. So we invite all those who are involved in protected areas as a technician, a manager, to take part in that survey. It's really important that we gather that information. But outdoor sports people, don't you worry, your survey is coming up shortly afterwards. We're just engaging the protected area world first. Let's get their views, and as Mike intimated there, a survey will be going out to the Outdoor Sports Federation world as well in order to get information from you guys too. So plenty of opportunities for you to be involved in this project with your you are the intelligence. With your information, we hopefully in the project will build this toolkit and this like as Miles talked about for the Adventure Guys, this new standard for outdoor sports, bringing sustainability and environmental awareness aspects into what is already, the very good professional training that's given. So please take a note of the link. It's in the chat now, and we will be posting that out on social media and other channels in the coming days. So our final words, I'm leaving to our project leader from Noel Doyle from Leave No Trace in Ireland. So Noel, final words from our webinar from you.
Absolutely, Carol, and I think I'll take a good 20 minutes to deliver some final words because that's what everyone's looking forward to. I'd just like to say thank you very much. My name is Noel Doyle. I work for Leave No Trace Ireland, which is the project lead for the C project, and I'd just like to say I'm absolutely honoured to, and it is my pleasure to provide some closing remarks on what has been a very interesting webinar. I think there was a great linkage between all the presentations. It began with Lisa, and she delivered a foundation of why the outdoors are important and the different perspectives of looking at the resources of the outdoors, looking at it from the perspective of an active user to then looking at the perspective of a biologist, and then understanding and promoting why it all needs protection and how this can be done, and which then led to we need to increase engagement. That was a very key point. You need to include recreational users They need to feel like they are considered, because once they are considered and once you educate them, the promotion of responsible practices becomes easier to do. But as well as that, you need to work with the development of resources and facilities in order to be able to show people the correct way to do things and provide them a resource where they can still enjoy the environment that they cherish in a way that is responsible. Then moving on to Danielle, the work that he does in making people inspired and bringing them to the mountain, and bringing people together and incorporating engagement at the very start, trying to identify the problem, who are the main stakeholders, and using an integrated approach where you're involving different groups in the integration and planning stage, as well as the communication stage. So you're showing them that we can work together, we're developing our policies with you, and that helps with the upkeep. And then using this blended mix of regulation, integration, and education. Further on, we're going to talk about Miles, and whereas he was developing a standard adventure tourism guide, and what this was, it was able to promote the why and have sustainability as a core component of what they want to promote, and kind of highlighting that guides, good guides are just as important. A bad guide can be just as harmful to the environment as a good guide can. So if we can develop and raise the level of what a guide can be, the promotion of responsible recreation or outdoor sports can become easier. Talking about the development of sustainability practices. But then he said something very clever. It was about the incorporation of heritage and interpretation and nature interpretation as a critical component or a taught skill of the guiding kind of program, will teach guides to promote responsible ethics in their work, which is a core component of what the C project is, and kind of is really important. And as well as that, Mike and Carol as well have said that we need engagement from all of our stakeholders, which includes the outdoor sports federations as well as outdoor sports professionals and advocate outdoor sports enthusiasts, to help us develop our surveys, to help us develop and learn from the experiences and the wealth of knowledge that you all have. So it was an amazing webinar, and I'm absolutely thrilled that the survey has been launched now, and I strongly encourage every single one to follow the link that's going to be in the chat now, and it's going to be sent to everyone. So I think without further ado, hopefully, Carol, I didn't miss anything there. So I'd just like to thank everyone for coming.
Yep, thank you very much, Noel. I think as we bring our webinar to a close, we're taking the tent down and going back into our home places. Again, just ask you not only to take part in the survey about the outdoor sports in protected areas, but we've just put a little link up just to ask your thoughts about how you enjoyed or otherwise this webinar. It will help us to develop topics and other webinars that you might be interested in the future. So thank you very much for your contribution there. I'd like to just make a special thanks to Teresa and Misha from my own team in EUROPARC for everything they've done to put this webinar together. But especially thank you to all of you who are still in the tent or just about to leave the tent, for your contributions, for your engagement, for answering each other's questions and supporting and helping each other with this interesting topic. I look forward to meeting you all again, either in person or in Zoom at some point in the future. So thank you very much for coming today, and happy outdoor sporting. Bye-bye for now.